Okay, so we have our first beaker here. Has 1/2 pea size of butter, and it's right on the tip of that stick there. Okay, and I have 50 milliliters in that first beaker, 50 milliliters of water. Beaker number 2 has 50 milliliters of oil, and what I have there is another 1/2 pea size of butter on the tip of that stick. It's really tiny. Okay, that's beaker 2. Beaker number 3 has salt on the spoon. There's a 1/2 teaspoon of salt there. And what we're going to do is we're going to put the 1/2 teaspoon of salt in 50 milliliters of water. Beaker number 4 has 50 milliliters of oil. And what we're going to do is put a 1/2 teaspoon of salt in the oil. Beaker number 5 has 50 milliliters of water, and I have a 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda on the spoon. And beaker number 6 has 50 milliliters of oil, and we have a 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda on the spoon. So what we need to do first is make a prediction for each beaker after we put the item into each of the 6 beakers. Will there be solubility, right? So I'm going to take the first item here, this butter, dink, and I'm going to put the butter inside of, that's kind of how to get that butter off there, so I'm just going to pinch a piece off. It'll probably be easier. Okay, there we go. So there's a piece of butter in there, and the directions are to stir the beaker for 1 minute. So I'm going to start my timer and start to stir the beaker to see if solubility occurs. Two, and then 1. Okay, so you can see there's a lot of butter stuck on the stirring rod. And if we look inside the beaker, the water is clear. And actually what happened to the butter was it got stuck on the inside of the beaker. It really didn't do anything. So, is there solubility? Beaker number 2. We have, I'm going to take a 1/2 pea size piece of butter. Again, I'm going to break a little piece of that off with my finger here. And then I'm going to dunk it in the oil. And then instructions again are to stir for 1 minute. I'm going to use a different stirring rod and restart my timer at 1 minute, and here we go. About 10 seconds left. Three, two, one. Okay, so let's take a look at what we have. Well, the butter is still in there. It's still one piece. It would have been one piece in the water if I had not smeared it on the inside of the beaker in the water, but nonetheless we would have had the same result there in the water with that one piece, but that's what we have. So again, do we have solubility here? Okay, beaker number 3 is 1/2 teaspoon of salt in 50 milliliters of water. Do we think we're going to have solubility? So I'm going to take the salt, put it in the water, start my timer again, and stir for 1 minute. About 30 seconds left. Two, 1, 0. Okay, we'll take that stirring rod up. We'll take a look at it. Look inside. Do we still see that 1/2 teaspoon of salt in there? You decide if there's solubility. Okay, beaker number 4 is going to be 1/2 teaspoon of table salt in 50 milliliters of oil. I'm going to put the 50 milliliters of salt in the oil, start our trusty timer, and then I'll take the stirring rod here and stir for 1 minute. About 20 seconds left. Ten seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, so let's take a look in here. That's what it looks like. I see a lot of salt just settled on the bottom. It didn't really seem to do much. You can see all that salt on the bottom. I'm going to bring that water up just to show you again with the salt. Much different. You don't see any water down there on the bottom at all. Okay, so you decide for the oil with 50 milliliters of oil and salt. Do we have solubility? It brings us to beaker number 5. We're going to take a 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda and put it into 50 milliliters of water, and then we're going to mix. See if there's solubility. Okay, there we go. And timer, start 1 minute. Pick up the stirring rod and stir. 25 seconds left. Four, three, two, one. Okay. So let's take a look inside. That's the bottom. I don't really see, I don't see any baking powder, any traces of it. So you decide if there's solubility there. Okay. And our beaker number 6 is a half teaspoon of baking soda we're going to put into 50 milliliters of water. So there we go. And start our timer over here to 1 minute and stir. About 15 seconds. Ten seconds. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. It's interesting. It's kind of, how do you describe that? Opaque in color. Much different than, this is the powdered sugar. This is the baking soda in the 50 milliliters of oil. It's kind of an opaque color. I don't see really any individual grains floating around. And I'm going to just compare that real quick to our 50 milliliters of oil with table salt. Rock salt's the same thing, and here you can see definitely the salt at the bottom sitting there. And I guess what we could do is compare this with the oil from the half pea size of butter in the oil. Okay. So let's take a look at that here. That's right here. There's the half, that's the oil with the half pea size. And here's the half pea size. So let's review real quick. After a minute of stirring, here is the half pea size piece of butter still in the water. The half pea size of butter still in the oil. Half teaspoon of salt and 50 milliliters of water is gone. It's not appearing to the eye anyway. Then we have a half teaspoon of salt and 50 milliliters of vegetable oil sitting at the bottom with the oil above it. Half teaspoon of baking powder, baking soda, and 50 milliliters of water. Right? Pretty clear. And then again, beaker 6 with the half teaspoon of baking soda and 50 milliliters of oil. It's kind of like a milky, kind of cloudy color now. All right, that's it.